Hey everyone, welcome to A Better Life 123. And now here are life coaches Laurie Green and Chauncey Wenner discussing their thoughts about how to approach difficult life situations.
Hello, my name is Chauncey Wenner, and I'm here with my other half, which is Laurie Green. And today's topic is when life throws you a lemon. Let me say a couple things up front about that. One is all lemons are not equal, and even a minor lemon can cause a terrible disruption in someone's life if it comes at a perfectly wrong time. And of course, we have the other experience, which is one person's lemon may just be a grapefruit to somebody else. So how we perceive lemons, what we do with them, depends on who you are and what your framing is in life. But I want to discuss this with Laurie and see what kind of conversation we can make about this. And so let me start with this. Is there a wise and constructive goal when life feeds you a lemon? What are your first thoughts that you would say to a client in that situation?
Yeah, so to me, I think you and I have talked about this. The old saying that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So yeah, that's a good perspective to sort of come from. Easier said than done. It's not always, particularly depending on the size of the lemon, right? It can be really hard to maintain a positive perspective when you're going through a situation. And I would say that there is no right or wrong way to traverse that. Like, I just don't think there is. I think what becomes more beneficial is just being present with whatever is coming up during the process of your doing that. And then once you're able to do that, then we can talk about, what positive things we can do with that for a future reference, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think what my perspective would be, and you'll learn through these podcasts that Laurie and I approach life quite differently, and yet we often end up at a very similar place, which is part of what we think will make this interesting for those of you out there. I tend to be very cerebral. It's very useful for me to know the goal. And so, when life feeds you lemons, learn to, figure out how to make lemonade, to me is a really important wisdom that's very helpful for me to know the goal. But of course, the issue becomes that even though it's useful to know goals because it gives you at least a place to send your ship, even if the winds are going crosswise. But what happens when the winds are going crosswise? What happens if you've got anger issues or bitterness issues around this? This can happen for medical conditions. This can happen for relationship conditions. This can help for all kinds of reasons. So, and Laurie already said, and I'll turn it back to you in just a second, but she already said, there's no wrong way to navigate. But there are certainly constructive and more constructive, and you don't always have a choice in what your brain's going to do to you. Yeah. And so let's talk about that more about, if someone's just handling it very cerebrally, and then that's great. Arguably, it's not much of a challenge, and there's not maybe much guidance we can give in this. But what do you do if you find yourself very angry or bitter, or this feeds on, it's like salt in the wounds of your past life. You're like, oh my God, not again. Why me? Well, how would you advise people to start managing those emotions so that you don't go down into a deep pit of deconstructive, behaviors?
Yeah, and a lot of that I think kind of depends on what the lemon actually is, about how that's going to work. I do think, in my experience, that one of the best things you can do is accept, just accept where you're at. You and I talk about this too, the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, recognizing that if you are in a situation that you can do something about, then that's great. Do something about it. That'll be helpful. If you're in a situation where you don't have any control over it, I think accepting that reality is a good first step. Being able to navigate it more successfully and come to an end of making lemonade out of a lemon and to the best of your ability. So yeah, I think it starts there. I think it starts with acceptance. And then from there, I think it just moves into what can I do? what can I do to get the most out of this situation? Or what can I do to feel like I am actually engaged in the process of whatever is happening and able to show up the way I want to show up in the situation, is what I think.
Yeah. So, and let's talk about acceptance, because the Serenity
Yeah.
Prayer is one of, to me, it's probably the single most useful wisdom, because it's very general and it's always correct. And yet the third line doesn't offer a lot of help, right?
Yeah.
We all pat ourselves in the back when we hear it, go like, that's amazing. But when you get to the step that says, grant me the wisdom to know the difference, how do you know if you've had the wisdom to know the difference of
Right.
whether something's changeable or not? Is that the same now when you're 40 as it was when you were 20, as it was when you were 10, right? It's a moving target. And so acceptance makes a lot of sense. Let's say I get in a terrible car wreck and I lose the use of my legs the rest of my life. It's easy to say acceptance, you should accept it,
Totally.
because at a logical level, it makes sense. It's spilt milk. It's done. And why choose to spin on it in your head? And yet most of us would for something that catastrophic. And how do you get to a point of true acceptance, not grudging, not like learning to live with it, which is not acceptance. You may have a high tolerance for beating yourself up and being unhappy. Learning to live with it, that's how you do it. It's like, well, I have a much higher level of of being disgruntled and pissed off.
Yeah.
So what do you think? How does that? What helps someone let go of that kind of thing and actually move ahead? Maybe not every day, maybe not 24/7, but approaching it much better. True acceptance.
That is such a great question.
I know I put you in a spot. I don't want to answer it.
That is such a great question. And I think, again, it kind of depends on the way a person's built and the situation. So, for people who are more cerebral, certainly the end of, my goal here is to make lemonade out of this. So if you know that's your goal, then that whatever's happening, being disgruntled about it or being angry about it for an extended period of time is not going to get you lemonade, at least not fresh lemonade. So that can be a way of just remembering what's my end goal here, which I think in any situation is good. Mm-hmm. What's my end goal? What do I want to do? Which is also, even if you're not so cerebral, I was saying, just recognizing how you want to show up in a situation if you feel like it's not controllable. It's kind of the same thing. So the point of acceptance comes to just saying, this is what it is, and this is how I choose to show up. And honestly, I think that works well, even if you don't know whether or not it's something within your control, because sometimes you don't always have the answer. I mean, I'm going through a very life-altering situation right now that I don't currently have an answer for, and I don't know what the end is going to be. And I am working through this process of acceptance. The only thing that I can focus on right now that I would encourage other people to do in your situation is how do I want to show up in the situation, regardless of whether or not I find out that I have control of it or not. How do I want to show up? How do I want to present myself? And to what end, right? To what end am I presenting myself that way? Do I want to be angry all the time, regardless of the situation? I have people in my life. Is that how I want to navigate the situation? When I get on the other side of it, how will I have wanted to have seen myself gone through it?
Wow, that's I love that. Yeah.
To me, that's kind of where it's at when I get on the other side of this. Because a lot of times you can go through things and you're not present in it, or you're so busy just getting through it that you're really, and sometimes we don't have the luxury to do what I'm about to say. So I want to be clear about that. Sometimes your main focus has to be breathing your next breath. So I understand that. And yet there are other circumstances where we do have more room and more liberty to show up a particular way. And instead of taking advantage of that opportunity, sometimes we're more focused on, I just want this to be over. I just want it to be over and I want to be on the other side. So I think it can be beneficial to think about, okay, so if and when you get to the other side, what's the memory you want to have about how you navigated what you went through? Do you want to remember that you were angry and upset all the time, which could be perfectly understandable depending on the situation? Or do you want to remember that you offered something to the world, or that you had a great relationship with your friends and families and loved ones and your partner? What is it that the end, you know?
Yeah, I want to piggyback off something you said, because you said it may be perfectly normal to be angry and all that. You use slightly different words, but this is something that I harp on quite a bit, which is it may be normal to be angry or bitter about something and fully within the typical response, but it is important to try to get to a place in life where you can realize it's not necessary in a lot of cases, right? I mean, again, everyone can get knocked off the horse no matter how equanimous you've become in life. If something's big enough, you're probably going to get knocked off. But the point is, if you don't want to be in a place where you think that anger and bitterness are inevitable. They may be normal for whatever happened, but it's still, you know, that there's going to be a future you in all likelihood, except in very extreme cases. And you can know now that the future you is going to be happier if you deal with this situation better and more constructively right now. And so that, again, is a clear target, because that's cause and effect, and can provide some positive motivation, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's, so this doesn't get too long. Let's talk about, so we've talked about it's spilt milk, we've talked about making the best of it, which is trying to figure out, how to learn from it. Because if you really can't change it, your options are to spin on it emotionally all the time, or to figure out a way to move on or gain some benefit from it for your future life. Let's talk about the possibility of some friction with either a loved one or with a friend who says something that seems insensitive to you. And I think what I'm thinking of here is, I brought it up at the very beginning of the video, that one person's lemon may just be a grapefruit to someone else that they want to sit down and eat with a little sugar at breakfast time. Diversity. We have different experiences. What tweaks us emotionally varies from person to person, and that's inevitable. So what do you think happens if you're going through something hard and someone else, at least initially, is just kind of like, wow, hey, shake it off, grow up, or whatever it is. What do you think about this, dealing with the inevitable diversity between people, in particular the ones we really love and don't want to have disruption with?
Yeah. So I think there's so much liberty here, depending on what your situation is and what you're dealing with, and your relationship with the people we're talking about, and how important are those relationships to you. So ultimately, your mental health, your personal well-being is your priority, right? You can't show up well for anybody until you can show up well for yourself. In a healthy way. I'll say in a healthy way. So when friends and family are coming, because it does happen, you're going through something, and to them it's not a big deal. And so they want to try to, they think they're helping by saying something that they feel is constructive that maybe doesn't sound so constructive to you. And number one, recognizing that diversity is the thing, that we don't all process things the same. We don't see things the same, number one. Number two, understanding that they're not in that situation. You are. So they have the great privilege of looking at it from someone who maybe isn't in the position that you are, feeling the turmoil and whatever that you may be feeling while you're trying to navigate a situation that is very real to you, regardless of how it feels to them. And so understanding that you're coming from your perspective of being in a situation, they're coming from the perspective of somebody who's not in the situation, or maybe who has already been and is on the other side of that situation, can help you hopefully give them some grace and some of the things that they might say.
I love that word. Yeah.
Right. And so that you can not internalize it. Is what I would say. Whatever people are saying, positive or negative, I don't think it's a good idea to internalize that. I think it's much more useful to allow them to say what they need to say, put healthy boundaries around that. In some cases, there's some things you might not need to hear, or that might be beneficial for you to hear. And being able to have effective communication with somebody can be really useful in that. And at the same time, if it's a kind of relationship where communication doesn't work, it may just mean that you need to put a boundary around that person of either saying, hey, this is off topic, or just not talking to them, during this time. So there's a lot of ways that you can navigate that kind of stuff. I think it's best in the beginning, though, to just recognize people see things differently. Everybody doesn't see things the way that we do. We can offer them some grace, which helps us actually even more than it helps them. It's going to be better for you to be holding a positive, uplifting kind of energy anytime you're going through anything, and you'll have enough to deal with within yourself, less known taking on some energy from somebody else.
One of the things that makes it easier to experience grace when dealing with another person is to realize that it's not that many people in most of our circles that really understand the extent, the depth and breadth of what diversity means. So people can say stuff to you like, well, I went through that and here's what I did. And they can say it with a tone like they probably really do assume that because it worked for them, it's going to work for you. And it's an assumption. And it's very often quite naive. Their intention's important, but if you understand diversity, that, hey, people inevitably have different experiences and different ways of interpreting them, and they're not consciously aware of that when they're sharing that kind of information to you that way. And that's normal. It's just going to be there. So I want to close with this, and again with the recognition that so many wisdoms are easier said than done, but knowing them does provide you a rudder to help navigate things more constructively with less turmoil. And one of the things I wrote on, see people put yellow stickies on their mirrors and, to remind them of things in the morning. I actually have a whiteboard that I have in my bathroom if I have something really big that I want to remember or start to try to remember. And one of the things that I've written, and don't let this sound simplistic to you because, again, easier said than done, but it's a great perspective, is that the past is the past. It's always done. All you can ever work on is trying to make sure that your decisions now are the best ones for your future life, and then become a good memory of your past. And the way I wrote this down is, our job every day is exactly the same, regardless of how good or bad our situation is, which is to get out of bed, put one foot in front of the other, and make the best decisions we know how to for our future selves. And with that, we hope that we've provided you some useful information, and thanks for joining us.
Thank
Aloha.
you.